Now, speaking of things I did love,
Mm.
a friend and I actually went to the Godzilla Minus One fan preview that they had last night.
Ooh.
Now, what's interesting is that I knew multiple people who went to this thing. Apparently, Washington State has the most sedate moviegoers ever because people in Tennessee, like my friend in Tennessee, was talking about how the audience cried and gasped and applauded.
Yeah.
That did not happen at my showing. And again, we had about 20 people versus their 60.
And how many of those 20 were stoned?
Um,
Because it is Washington.
yeah, fair question. I wasn't paying attention. Hopefully, the 6-year-old girl who kept having to get up to go to the bathroom wasn't one of them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But all right, Godzilla Minus One. Basic premise for Godzilla Minus One. Uh, it is a movie that is made by Toho, so this is not in the MonsterVerse continuity. Um,
Okay.
it is also, as far as I can tell, like you could maybe squint and have it be in the original series continuity. It's just you'd have to explain why people didn't recognize Godzilla when he showed up again in the 50s.
Uh, yeah.
Also, his power set seems to be a bit different in this one. So it
Mm.
that's one of those things where these aren't movies known for consistency anyway. So,
Right. Yeah.
but the original Godzilla was made in the 50s, and Godzilla was a metaphor for the atomic bomb.
Mm.
He is actually something a little bit different this time. Uh, this is a very much a character study, not of Godzilla himself. And pull this up. So Shikishima is a former kamikaze pilot from World War II. Now, I will give you a moment to wrap your head around what's the problem with that statement.
Well, well, usually the kamikaze pilots die.
Yes. So basically, this movie is about it's about Shikishima who ends up um, pretending that his plane is having mechanical problems, and he lands on this island in the South Pacific where they have an air base set up. This is during the island hopping campaign,
Okay.
as the Americans were closing in on the Japanese mainland.
Mm.
And in the middle of the night, this giant T Rex looking thing shows up, and and Shikishima freezes up when he's called on to use his Zero's 20 millimeter cannons to try to kill Godzilla.
Mm.
And this results in the death of everybody on the whole island except for him and the lead mechanic, who hates him
Yeah, of course.
because he didn't do his job. He gets back to a bombed out Tokyo,
Mm.
which so one of the things they don't show in the movies as much about World War II is just how, like, people are like, oh, the atomic bomb was so awful. It was, if you were killed by the atomic bomb, it was a cleaner death than some of the firebombing campaigns they were doing on the Japanese mainland. Because
Yeah.
Japanese cities at the time were mostly wood and rice paper, which burns real good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe that they were using early forms of napalm for some of these firebombings.
Yeah. Yeah. If you've ever seen Grave of the Fireflies,
Yeah,
it's like that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So he gets back to a Tokyo that is basically rubble. That's actually where the title is, Godzilla Minus One. And it's not only just before the first movie, it's Japan when it isn't even at ground zero. It's at negative development.
Ooh, man.
And so it's him dealing with the massive amount of survivor's guilt. People tell him he didn't do his job. We could have won if you'd done your duty, somebody tells him,
Yeah.
even though
Yeah.
the kamikaze pilots didn't really accomplish much,
No, they didn't.
at least on a strategic level.
Yeah.
Um, and he ends up befriending a woman named Noriko and her adopted daughter, who was basically given to her by her dying mother.
Mm.
So, like, it's just they end up being a little family together that isn't bound by anything.
mm,
And then Godzilla shows up again after the atomic testing turns him from a T-Rex sized animal, more or less,
yeah.
into a building sized beast.
Yeah.
And it's about the efforts of the Japanese populace, not the Navy, not the US occupiers, just the Japanese populace to try to fight this thing off.
Mm,
So that's about as much as I want to get into the actual plot of it, because spoiler alert, I really loved this movie. I
okay.
was actually not expecting to love this movie, and I'll tell you why I was not expecting to love this movie.
All right.
Um, I've ended up seeing a lot of kaiju movies and TV shows uh, in the last few years because I have some friends who are very much into that.
Yeah.
Guess what? The number one complaint I usually have about these shows is
What's that?
that I don't give a crap about the characters.
Yeah.
There are some character focused Ultraman shows like Geed that have my interest, but at the end of the day, they are there to portray, yeah, they're just there to sell toys and have a big rubber suit fight or CGI kaiju fight.
Mm,
Like I remember when I saw Godzilla King of the Monsters, the MonsterVerse one, and I gave the movie more credit because I hadn't seen the first of those MonsterVerse Godzilla movies.
oh.
And I'd assumed, oh, this character here must have been like this main guy here must have been the main character from the previous movie, which he was not. Which meant the fact that they didn't explain all that much about him, more explicable in my mind.
Yeah.
This is the only kaiju movie I have ever seen where you would have still had an interesting storyline, even if the kaiju was completely excised from the movie.
Ah.
You would have just had a story of found family and survivor's guilt and other stuff, and him like he would have had to deal with it in a different way than getting basically a second chance to defend his homeland.
Okay. Huh. Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's like I will say for Godzilla himself, he is not in the movie as much as more recent entries. This is actually kind of welcome because it makes it have more impact when he does show up. And just
Mhm.
the production design on this in general is brilliant.
Mm,
They are so good at building tension.
mm.
Like think about a Godzilla movie. How often are you actually afraid for the common or for the people in the streets during a Godzilla movie? Like okay, just it's just carnage and body count, whatever.
Yeah.
There's a scene where Godzilla picks up a subway car or a train car, and someone
Yeah.
is dangling out of it, and I was legitimately terrified for them.
Oh, wow.
Like, I can't
Yeah.
think of the last time I saw a Godzilla movie that actually made me feel, and it did that because it has such strong character beats and growth and everything.
Mm.
Like you get legitimately invested in the cast.
Uh, wow. That's yeah, like you're saying for a Godzilla movie, that's pretty astonishing.
Yeah, but like they're so again like this is a Godzilla who technically might not be as powerful as some versions of him, though he does some pretty crazy crap like throwing ships hundreds of feet around just like casually.
Yeah.
But they're very good at making you feel every moment.
Mm,
It's also a semi-realistic thing. I won't spoil what their final plan is to kill Godzilla, but it's based on okay, like in the original, they had to invent a whole oxygen destroyer super weapon
yeah.
that based on nonsense science.
Ah.
This one, it's like okay, you know what? This is a plausible enough plan based on my high school chemistry knowledge. At least the way you're presenting it seems reasonable.
Yeah. And Ninja asks, does did he perform the run?
Right? No, right. That's the thing is he faked engine problems, and the head mechanic is like, I didn't see any problems with your plane.
Uh,
Right. The other thing about this is it's kind of like in every war there are are people who commit atrocities. But there are people who are just fighting for their homeland to protect the people they love.
mm,
And as much as we Americans can, and the Allied countries in general can think of Germany and Japan and Italy as just mustache twirling villains. Uh,
Hmm.
there were a lot of decent people who were just kind of caught up in a situation outside of their control.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, this movie is basically like it's like giving the Japanese military a worthy foe, like a fight that you could actually feel good about. Because when you think about it, there was like a big buildup for an invasion or for an American conventional invasion of the Japanese homeland that never happened.
Right.
So maybe I'm reading more into this than they meant, but there's like a level where the it's like they never had their real test of strength, right? Or they never had like they were built up for it, and then the government just capitulated
Yeah.
after the atomic bombings, which I do not blame them.
Yeah.
Who wants to deal with more of that?
No.
Um, but yeah, so it's I could it definitely it kind of spoke to me as somebody who is like it gave me an alternate perspective on the history of this. And Ninja asks, so is it more historically accurate than Ridley's wife's boyfriending of Napoleon? From what I've heard about Napoleon, yes. Hey, Daniel, did you know that there was trench warfare during the Napoleonic Wars? Apparently,
What?
that's what they portray in the movie.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, no, there's a reason you don't remember that from any other adaptation you've ever seen of that.
Yeah. Pretty
But yeah,
sure that didn't happen for about 100 years.
yeah, like, there was
Or-
like a little bit of it during the Civil War, like late Civil War.
Mhm.
There's a level where if European generals had paid more attention to the like late American Civil War, they could have done better
Yeah.
because the weaponry was similar enough that they were having to go to the similar tactics by the end of it.
Yeah. Ninja says they existed, but not at Waterloo.
Well, and not
Most
the way
likely.
they're showing it, from what I've
Yeah.
heard, is it? But anyway, back to a good movie.
Yeah. Yes.
The Godzilla Minus One starts this weekend. Again, I was at a special preview. I can't see how it did on that special preview because it's one of those things where it's going to be rolled into the Friday box office. But I
Mm,
really hope this movie catches on. The thing is that it is subtitle only, so that has advantages and disadvantages depending on your preferences. But
yeah.
I'll say there's some dynamite performances, excellent character work. It made me care about things. If you're just the kind of Godzilla fan who just wants to see a big slobber knocker fight between multiple kaiju or just scene after scene of Godzilla wrecking shit, there's some of that, but it's not what the movie's about.
Mm,
So it's more of a thinking man's Godzilla movie.
wow.
So take that as you will.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll definitely check this movie out. I might do it. I don't know if I'll see it in the theater, but I'll definitely watch it on digital or if it's
I
on
have
a
a
streaming service.
I have a sneaking suspicion this will end up on Netflix just because Netflix has multiple original Godzilla properties on there, so they seem to be in bed with Toho.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Awesome.